The day Nora Thornton's stagecoach wheel snapped clean off its axle and sent her tumbling into a muddy ravine outside Bismarck, Dakota Territory, in the summer of 1877, she knew her curse had followed her west. She lay there in the muck, her traveling dress ruined, her belongings scattered across the hillside like seeds thrown to unforgiving earth. The other passengers had already been rescued by the time she climbed back up, their faces a mixture of pity and fear as they looked at her. The driver refused to take her any farther, said she was bad luck, and he would not risk the lives of the other passengers. They left her standing on the side of the dusty road with her trunk and a canvas bag, watching the repaired coach disappear toward town. That was how Yates Bishop found her, standing in the middle of nowhere with mud dried in her auburn hair and tears making clean tracks down her dirty cheeks. He came down from the mountains like something out of a legend, riding a massive bay horse with a pack mule trailing behind. His beard was thick and dark, his shoulders broad as an oak tree, and his eyes the color of a winter sky just before snow. "You hurt." His voice was deep, rumbling from his chest like distant thunder. Nora wiped at her face, smearing more dirt than she cleaned. "Only my pride." He dismounted in one fluid motion despite his size. Up close, he was even more imposing. Easily 6.5 feet tall, with hands that looked like they could break rocks. But his expression was gentle as he looked her over, checking for injuries with the practiced eye of someone who had seen plenty. "What happened to your stage?" "Wheel broke. I was the only one who fell. The driver said I was cursed and refused to take me any farther." The words came out bitter but true. She had heard similar sentiments her entire life. The mountain man studied her for a long moment, then bent to lift her heavy trunk as if it weighed nothing at all. "Where you headed?" "Bismarck. I have a job waiting there, or I did." "I am supposed to start teaching school tomorrow," she laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Though I suppose I will lose that too once they hear about today. Then we better get you there before dark so you can clean up." He secured her trunk to his pack mule with efficient movements. "Town is about 5 miles northeast." Nora stared at him. "You would help me, even after I told you I was cursed." He turned those winter sky eyes on her, and something in his expression made her heart skip in an entirely unexpected way. "Madam, I have survived 3 winters trapped in the mountains. 2 grisly attacks, a rockslide, and a flash flood that took out half a valley. If you are cursed with bad luck, then I figure I am lucky enough for us both." The simple confidence in his words struck something deep inside her. Nobody had ever responded to her confession that way. Most people crossed themselves and hurried away. But this mountain man just smiled slightly and offered her his hand to help her onto his horse. She took it. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and solid. He lifted her into the saddle like she weighed no more than a child, then swung up behind her. The horse did not even shift under their combined weight. "Name is Yates Bishop," he said as they started moving. "Most folks just call me Bishop. Nora Thornton." She tried to hold herself stiffly, not wanting to lean back against him, but the horse's gait and her exhaustion made it difficult. "You can relax, Miss Thornton. I do not bite." There was amusement in his voice, but not mockery. "Long ride ahead and you have had a rough day." She let herself settle back slightly. He was warm and solid behind her, and she could feel the steady rhythm of his breathing. It was oddly comforting after the chaos of the accident. "So you really believe you are cursed?" he asked after a few minutes of riding. Nora closed her eyes. "I know I am. It has followed me my whole life. Small things at first, broken dishes, torn dresses, minor accidents, but as I got older it got worse. My father died when a horse threw him. My mother caught fever and did not recover." The man I was engaged to marry was killed in a factory accident a week before our wedding. Every job I've tried to keep ends in disaster. Every place I live, something goes wrong. The boarding house I stayed in last month burned down the night after I left. I bring bad luck to everyone around me. She felt him shift behind her. Or maybe you have just had a hard run of it. Life in the West is not easy for anyone. You do not understand. It is more than that. It is a pattern. It is constant. Her voice cracked. I tried to stay away from people, to keep my distance so I would not hurt anyone else. But I have to work. I have to live somewhere. So I keep moving, keep trying new places, hoping maybe the curse will not follow. But it always does. They rode in silence for a while. The prairie stretched out around them, golden grass waving in the late afternoon breeze. Hawks circled overhead, and in the distance, she could see the smoke from Bismarck's chimneys rising into the clear blue sky. I lived alone in the mountains for 5 years, Yates said eventually. After the war, could not stand being around people anymore. Too many ghosts, too many memories. Figured I would just trap and hunt and keep to myself until I died. But you know what I learned up there? Nora waited. Being alone is its own kind of curse, maybe worse than any bad luck. Because at least when you are around people, when things go wrong, you have someone to face it with, someone to help shoulder the weight. His words settled over her like a warm blanket. She had been alone for so long, running from her curse, that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone on her side. Besides, he continued, and she could hear the smile in his voice, I mean what I said. I am lucky enough for both of us, you will see. They reached Bismarck just as the sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The town was bustling, full of the energy that came with being a relatively new settlement in expanding territory. The main street was wide and dusty, lined with wooden buildings that still smelled of fresh-cut lumber. Saloons, general stores, a bank, a hotel, and at the far end, a small white church with a schoolhouse beside it. Yates rode directly to the hotel and helped Nora down from his horse. She was acutely aware of how she must look, covered in dried mud, her dress torn and stained. The few people on the wooden sidewalk stared at them with open curiosity. Wait here, Yates said, and disappeared inside. Nora stood beside his horse, trying not to fidget. The animal turned its head and regarded her with one large, gentle eye. She reached up tentatively to stroke its nose. At least you do not seem to mind me, she murmured. Yates emerged a few minutes later with a key. Got you a room, has a bath. The owner said she would send up hot water and see about getting your dress cleaned if you have something else to wear. Nora stared at him. I cannot let you pay for that. Already done. He untied her trunk from the pack mule and carried it toward the hotel entrance. Come on. You need to get cleaned up, and I need to make sure you do not lose that teaching job before you even start it. Too tired and overwhelmed to argue, Nora followed him inside. The hotel was modest but clean, with simple furniture and whitewashed walls. The owner, a round-faced woman named Mrs. Patterson, clucked sympathetically when she saw Nora's condition and immediately took charge, shooing Yates back outside and leading Nora upstairs to a small room with a narrow bed, a washstand, and enough space for a hip bath. That Bishop is a good man, Mrs. Patterson said as she helped Nora out of her ruined dress. Does not come to town often, but when he does, he is always respectful. Helped my husband repair the hotel roof last spring and would not take a cent for it. True to her word, she had hot water brought up, along with soap and clean towels. Nora sank into the bath with a groan of relief, scrubbing away the mud and the aches of the day. When she emerged, wrapped in a towel, she found that Mrs. Patterson had unpacked her trunk and laid out her only other decent dress, a simple blue cotton with white buttons down the front. By the time Nora made her way back downstairs, clean and presentable, the sun had fully set, and the hotel dining room was filling with guests for supper. She found Yates sitting at a corner table, his beard freshly trimmed and his hair combed back. He had cleaned up too, and without the trail dust, she could see that he was probably close to 30, maybe a few years older. There was gray threading through his dark hair at the temples, and lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting against mountain sun and snow. He stood when he saw her, and his eyes warmed. "Much better. You look lovely, Miss Thornton." She felt herself blush, unused to compliments. "Thank you, and thank you for everything else. The room, the bath. I do not know how I will repay you. Do not worry about it." He pulled out a chair for her. "Just consider it a welcome to Dakota Territory. Now sit down and eat something. You look like you have not had a decent meal in days." He was not wrong. Nora had been traveling for nearly 2 weeks, living on dried meat and hard biscuits. The hotel served beef stew with fresh bread, and she ate with more enthusiasm than was probably ladylike, but Yates did not seem to mind. He ate his own meal steadily, watching her with what looked like satisfaction. "So tell me about this teaching job," he said when they had both finished eating. Nora wiped her mouth with her napkin. "The school board hired me by letter. They needed someone who could teach reading, writing, arithmetic, and music. The last teacher married a rancher and moved away. They are supposed to provide me with a small house behind the school and a salary of $25 a month. That is decent pay for a teacher out here, if I can keep the job." The old fear crept back into her voice. Once they learn about the accident today, about what the stage driver said, they might change their minds. Yates leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Or you could just not tell them. Start fresh. See what happens when you stop expecting the worst. You make it sound so simple." "Maybe it is." He stood and offered his hand. "Come on. Let me walk you to the school. You can see where you will be working, maybe meet some of the board members if they are around." The night air was cool and pleasant after the heat of the day. Bismarck's Main Street was quieter now, though laughter and piano music drifted from the saloons. Yates walked beside her, his presence somehow making her feel safer than she had in months. Maybe years. The schoolhouse was a tidy building painted white, with real glass windows and a bell tower. Beside it sat a small cottage, also white, with a covered porch and a garden plot that was currently overgrown with weeds. "That will be your place," Yates said, nodding toward the cottage. A light was burning in the schoolhouse window, and through it Nora could see a man moving around inside. Yates knocked on the door, and a moment later it swung open to reveal a tall, thin man with spectacles and thinning hair. "Yes. Oh, Bishop, good to see you. What brings you to town?" The man's eyes shifted to Nora. "And who is this?" "Reverend Clark, this is Miss Nora Thornton, your new school teacher." The Reverend's face lit up. "Miss Thornton, we have been expecting you. I am Samuel Clark. I serve as both the minister here and the head of the school board. Please come in, come in." They followed him into the schoolhouse. It was a single large room with rows of wooden desks, a blackboard at the front, and shelves lined with books. Everything was neat and orderly, ready for students. "I apologize for the late hour," Reverend Clark said, "but when I saw the stage come through today, I had hoped you would be on it. When you were not, I feared something had happened." Nora exchanged a glance with Yates. "There was an accident on the road. The wheel broke and I was thrown from the stage. Mr. Bishop found me and brought me to town." The Reverend looked concerned. "Are you injured?" "No, just shaken." "I am fine now. Thank the Lord for that, and thank you, Bishop, for bringing her safely here." He turned back to Nora. "We are very pleased to have you, Miss Thornton. The children have been without proper schooling for nearly 2 months now. Some of the mothers have been trying to teach them at home, but it is not the same. We have 23 children enrolled, ages 6 to 15. Classes begin at 8 in the morning and run until 3 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday. He walked her through the schoolhouse, showing her the supplies, the curriculum books, the small music corner with a battered piano that looked like it had survived a difficult journey west. Then he took her next door to the cottage, lighting a lamp so she could see inside. It was simple but comfortable. One large room served as both living space and bedroom with a separate small kitchen and a tiny washroom. The furniture was basic but solid. A bed, a table with 2 chairs, a rocking chair by the fireplace, and a wardrobe for her clothes. The school board provides firewood and basic supplies, Reverend Clark explained. You can take your meals at the hotel if you prefer, or cook for yourself. There is a root cellar out back for storage, and the well is shared with the church. Nora looked around, trying to imagine herself living here, teaching here. It seemed almost too good to be true, which immediately made her nervous. When would you like me to start? She asked. Tomorrow, if you are up for it. The children are eager to meet you. Tomorrow it is, then. They made arrangements for the Reverend to have her trunk brought over in the morning, and then Yates walked her back to the hotel. The moon had risen, nearly full, casting silver light over the dusty street. See, Yates said as they walked. No curse, just a good job and a fresh start. The day is not over yet, Nora said, but she was smiling despite herself. They stopped in front of the hotel. Nora turned to face him, suddenly reluctant for the evening to end. Will you be staying in town long? Something flickered in his eyes. Was planning to head back to my camp tomorrow. I came to town for supplies, not to socialize, but maybe I will stick around a few more days. Make sure you get settled in all right. Her heart did a small, unexpected flip. You do not have to do that, I know, but I want to. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of her hair behind her ear, the gesture surprisingly gentle for such a large, rough man. Get some rest, Miss Thornton. You have a big day tomorrow. She watched him walk away toward the livery stable, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the moonlight, and wondered if maybe, just maybe, her luck was finally starting to change. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Nora woke early, her stomach churning with nerves. She dressed carefully in her blue dress, pinned her hair up neatly, and made her way to the schoolhouse. Reverend Clark was already there, along with a handful of parents who had come to meet her. They were cautiously welcoming, asking questions about her education and experience. Nora answered honestly, telling them about the schools she had taught at back east, carefully leaving out the parts about why she had left each one. By the time the children started arriving, she was feeling more confident. The students ranged from a tiny 6-year-old girl named Sally who clutched her mother's skirts and stared at Nora with huge eyes, to a lanky 15-year-old boy named Thomas who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. But they were all reasonably well behaved, and after she introduced herself and started the first lesson, Nora felt herself relaxing into the familiar rhythm of teaching. She was midway through a geography lesson, pointing out the territories on a large map, when there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Yates standing there with her trunk balanced on one shoulder. "Morning, Miss Thornton. Reverend Clark asked me to bring this over to the cottage. Thought I would check to see if you needed help setting up." Every single child in the classroom was staring at him with wide eyes. Yates was an imposing figure in any context, but in the small schoolhouse, he seemed almost impossibly large. "Thank you, Mr. Bishop. If you would just leave it on the porch, I will deal with it after school." "I can do better than that." He looked at the children. "You all studying geography?" A chorus of uncertain yeses. Miss Thornton, if you do not mind, I could tell them a bit about the mountains. Real geography, not just maps." Nora hesitated, then nodded. This was highly irregular, but the children looked fascinated, and she was curious herself. Yates set her trunk down carefully and moved to the front of the room. Despite his size, he moved with surprising grace. He began talking about the mountain ranges to the west, the Black Hills and the Rockies, describing the terrain with the authority of someone who had lived it. The children listened with rapt attention as he told them about navigating by the stars, finding water sources, and surviving winter storms. He even pulled a piece of flint and steel from his pocket and showed them how to start a fire. By the time he left, promising to come back another day to teach them about tracking animals, the children were buzzing with excitement. The rest of the school day flew by, and Nora found herself smiling more than she had in months. When she finally dismissed the students at 3 o'clock, she went next door to her cottage to find that Yates had not only brought her trunk, but had also unpacked it, stocked the kitchen with basic supplies, and laid a fire in the fireplace ready to be lit. She stood in the middle of her new home, looking around at everything he had done, and felt tears prick her eyes. Kindness like this was so rare in her life. She was not sure what to do with it. That evening she found him at the hotel dining room again and insisted on buying him supper as a thank you. He protested, but she was firm. "You have done so much for me already. Please, let me do this." He relented, and they shared another meal, talking more easily now. He told her about his life in the mountains, about trapping beaver and marten, about the quiet solitude that had healed something broken inside him after the war. She told him about growing up in Philadelphia, about her love of teaching, about the music she missed playing on a good piano. "The school has that old piano," Yates said. "Does it work?" "I think so. It needs tuning, but the keys all function. Play something for me." "Now, why not?" So she led him back to the schoolhouse, lit a lamp, and sat down at the worn piano. She had not played in weeks, not since she left her last town, but her fingers remembered. She chose a Beethoven sonata, one of her favorites, and as the music filled the empty classroom, she felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. When she finished, Yates was standing by the window, looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. "You are very talented," he said quietly. "Music is one of the few things my curse does not seem to touch. Everything else I try fails, but when I play, it is like the bad luck cannot reach me." He crossed the room to stand beside the piano. "Or maybe there is no curse, and you are just good at music because you love it and you have practiced. Did you ever think of that?" She wanted to believe him. Looking up at his face in the lamplight, seeing the certainty in his eyes, she almost did. "Stay in Bismarck a while longer," she said impulsively. "A few more days, please." "All right," he said simply. "I will stay." Those few days turned into a week and then 2. Yates found work helping to build a new barn on the edge of town, and he took his evening meals at the hotel where Nora joined him after school. They fell into an easy routine, talking and walking and slowly learning each other. Nora discovered that Yates had fought for the Union in the war, that he had seen terrible things that still haunted him sometimes. He told her about growing up on a farm in Ohio, about losing his parents to cholera, about drifting west with nothing but what he could carry. He was quiet and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, nothing went wrong. The school ran smoothly. The children were learning. Her cottage stayed standing. No accidents befell anyone around her. "See," Yates said one evening as they sat on her porch watching the sun set. "No curse, just life." "Maybe you really are lucky enough for both of us," Nora said softly. He reached over and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. Or maybe you were never cursed to begin with. Maybe you just needed to stop running and let yourself live. She leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling safe and content in a way she had almost forgotten was possible. 3 weeks after Nora arrived in Bismarck, the first real test of her curse came. One of the students, a 7-year-old boy named James, fell during recess and broke his arm. Nora was supervising when it happened, and her first instinct was panic. The curse. Of course, she should have known it was too good to last. But then Yates was there. He had been walking past the school on his way back from work, and he immediately took charge. He set the boy's arm with practiced efficiency, speaking calmly to keep James from panicking, then carried him to the doctor's office. "Clean break," the doctor said after examining the boy. "Will heal fine. You did a good job setting it, Bishop." James's mother arrived in a flurry of worry, but after determining her son would be fine, she actually thanked Nora for supervising the children so well and Yates for his quick action. There was no blame, no accusation of bad luck. That night, Nora sat on her porch with her head in her hands, trying to process what had happened. Or rather, what had not happened. A child had been hurt while in her care, but it had not turned into a disaster. It had just been an accident, dealt with and resolved. Yates found her there, sitting in the gathering dark. "You all right?" he asked, settling down beside her. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to blame me for something worse to happen, but nothing did. It was just an accident, a normal, everyday accident." "That is because that is all it was." His voice was gentle but firm. "Nora, I have been watching you for weeks now. You are careful and conscientious and good at what you do, but you are also so afraid of this curse you think you carry that you see every little thing that goes wrong as proof. You do not see all the things that go right." "Like what?" "Like how Sally, that shy little girl, reads better now than she did a month ago. Like how Thomas, the boy who did not want to be in school, actually showed up yesterday with his homework done. Like how you have made friends with half the women in town. Like how the school board told Reverend Clark they are the luckiest people in the territory to have found a teacher like you." Nora looked at him, her eyes filling with tears. "I want to believe you. I want to believe that I am not cursed, that I can have a normal life. But I am so afraid." Yates cupped her face in his large, gentle hands. "Then be afraid. But do not let fear stop you from living. Do not let it stop you from being happy." He paused, his thumb brushing away a tear that had spilled down her cheek. "Do not let it stop you from letting people care about you. Is that what you are doing, caring about me?" "Yes," he said simply. "I am. I have been since the moment I found you standing on that road covered in mud, telling me about your curse without a hint of self-pity. You were just stating what you thought was fact. That kind of strength, that kind of honesty, it is rare. You are rare, Nora Thornton." "I care about you too," she whispered. "More than I should, probably. I keep trying to tell myself not to, that I will only bring you bad luck, but I cannot seem to help it. Good. Stop trying." And then he kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, but when she kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, it deepened into something that made her forget about curses and fear, and everything except the feeling of his mouth on hers, his arms around her, solid and safe and real. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I am in love with you," he said. "I know it has only been a few weeks. I know that is fast, but I have spent 5 years alone in the mountains with nothing but my own thoughts. I know what I feel. And I feel like I have been waiting my whole life for you." Nora's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. "I love you too. God help me, I do. But Yates, what if something happens to you because of me? What if my curse—" "There is no curse," he interrupted firmly. "There is just us. Two people who have both been through hard times, both been alone too long, both been waiting for something good. So let this be good, Nora. Let us be good. She kissed him again, pouring everything she felt into it. All her fear and hope and love and desperate desire to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have this. When they finally went inside, Yates stayed. They sat by the fireplace talking late into the night, holding hands, stealing kisses, making plans. He told her he wanted to court her properly, wanted to do this right. She told him he already was. The next few months passed in a blur of happiness that Nora kept expecting to end but never did. Yates stayed in Bismarck, taking on work as a carpenter and general laborer. He was strong and skilled and reliable, and people quickly came to depend on him. He built furniture, repaired buildings, helped dig wells, and worked on a new church that was being constructed on the other side of town. And every evening he came to Nora. They were the talk of the town, the schoolteacher and the mountain man, but it was kind talk, romantic talk. People said they made a handsome couple. They said Bismarck was lucky to have them both. Nora threw herself into teaching with renewed energy. She started a music program, teaching the children songs and helping the more talented ones learn to play the piano. She organized a spelling bee that became a town-wide event. She tutored the older students in the evenings, preparing them for higher education if they wanted it. And nothing went wrong. The school did not burn down. None of the children were seriously hurt. Her cottage remained standing. Her dresses did not tear. Dishes did not break. "I think your luck is rubbing off on me," she told Yates one evening as they walked along the Missouri River, watching the water flow past, golden in the sunset light. "Or you are finally seeing that you make your own luck," he replied, his arm around her waist. "Good or bad, it is not some mystical force. It is just choices and consequences and sometimes random chance. You sound very sure of that." "I am. Because I have seen real bad luck, Nora. I have seen men die for no reason at all in the war. I have seen good people lose everything through no fault of their own. And I have seen people blame themselves for things they could not control. You are doing the latter. You have had hard times, yes, but you have not had worse luck than anyone else trying to survive in this world. You have just convinced yourself you have." She stopped walking and turned to face him. "What if you are right? What if I have spent my whole life running from something that was never real? Then you stop running. You stay here with me." He pulled her close. "Marry me, Nora," her breath caught. "What? Marry me?" "I know we have not been courting that long by conventional standards, but nothing about either of us is conventional. I love you. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and come home to you every evening. I want to help you teach those kids and watch you play piano and grow old with you. So marry me." Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." He kissed her there on the riverbank as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. And Nora felt something inside her finally break free, some tight knot of fear and doubt that had been lodged in her chest for years. She was not cursed. She was just alive. And she was in love. They were married a month later in the small white church, with most of the town in attendance. Nora wore a dress that Mrs. Patterson had helped her sew, simple white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Yates wore his best clothes, his beard neatly trimmed, his hair combed back. He looked nervous and happy and so handsome that Nora's heart ached with love for him. Reverend Clark performed the ceremony, and the children from the school sang. When Yates kissed his bride, the whole congregation erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with food and music and dancing in the street. Nora played the piano while others danced, and later, Yates pulled her into his arms and they danced together, moving slowly even as the music picked up tempo, lost in their own world. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. "Happier than I ever thought I could be." "Good. Because this is just the beginning." They spent their wedding night in a room at the hotel that Mrs. Patterson had decorated with wildflowers and candles. It was sweet and awkward and perfect, two people who had been alone too long finally finding home in each other. The next morning, they moved Yates's belongings into the cottage behind the school. It was crowded now with both their things, but neither of them minded. They were building a life together, piece by piece. Yates continued his carpentry work, and Nora continued teaching. They settled into married life with surprising ease, as if they had been doing this for years instead of weeks. They learned each other's rhythms and habits. Nora discovered that Yates was an early riser who liked to watch the sunrise with his coffee. Yates learned that Nora hummed when she was concentrating, usually fragments of whatever music she had been playing recently. That first winter was hard, as winters in Dakota Territory often were. The snow came early and stayed late, piling up in drifts that reached the windows. But the cottage was snug and warm, and Nora found she did not mind being snowed in with her husband. They spent long evenings by the fire, talking and reading and making love. Yates taught her to play chess, and she taught him to play simple songs on the piano. The school had to close for 2 weeks when the snow was at its worst, and during that time, Yates built furniture. He made them a new table and chairs, a bookshelf for Nora's growing collection of books, a hope chest with intricate carvings on the lid. "You are very talented," Nora said, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "I learned from my father. Before the cholera took him, he was the best carpenter in 3 counties." Yates's voice was quiet with memory. "He always said that wood has its own spirit and a good carpenter works with it, not against it. He would be proud of you." "I hope so." He pulled her into his lap, wrapping his arms around her. "I hope both our parents would be proud. I think we are doing all right for ourselves." "More than all right." She kissed him softly. "We are doing wonderfully." Spring came eventually, as it always did, melting the snow and turning the prairie green again. The school reopened, and Nora threw herself back into teaching with renewed enthusiasm. Several new families had moved to Bismarck over the winter, which meant more students. The school was getting crowded. At a school board meeting in April, Reverend Clark proposed building an addition to the schoolhouse to accommodate the growing number of children. "We are also going to need another teacher soon," he said, looking at Nora. "Perhaps you could start training an assistant, someone to help with the younger children while you focus on the older ones." It was a mark of how much trust they had in her, and Nora felt a surge of pride. She agreed immediately, and within a month, they had hired a young woman named Catherine Miller who had just arrived from St. Louis. She was 19, eager to learn and good with the children. Nora enjoyed training her, enjoyed having someone to share the workload with. As summer approached, Nora began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited to be sure before telling Yates, not wanting to get his hopes up if she was wrong. But as the weeks passed and her suspicions grew into certainty, she finally told him one evening in June. They were sitting on their porch, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. Yates had his arm around her shoulders and she was leaning against him, comfortable and content. "Yates, I have something to tell you." "What is it?" "I am going to have a baby." He went very still. Then he turned to look at her, his eyes wide. "Are you sure?" "Very sure. I have been to the doctor. He says the baby should come in January, maybe early February." For a moment, Yates just stared at her. Then a smile broke across his face, so wide and joyful that it transformed him. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing, before setting her down carefully as if she were suddenly made of glass. "We are going to have a baby," he said wonderingly. "Nora, we are going to be parents. Are you happy?" "Happy? I am beyond happy. I am." He shook his head, words failing him. Instead, he kissed her, gentle and reverent. "Thank you. Thank you for this, for everything, for letting me love you." That night, he lay with his hand on her still flat stomach, talking to the baby who could not yet hear him, making promises about the life they would have together. Nora listened, her heart so full she thought it might overflow. This man, this wonderful, kind, strong man, was going to be the father of her child. They were going to be a family. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Nora continued teaching through the fall, though she trained Catherine to take over more responsibilities as the months went on. The town was excited about the baby. Mrs. Patterson knitted blankets and booties. Some of the mothers brought over baby clothes their children had outgrown. Even Reverend Clark seemed pleased, saying the town needed more good families like theirs. Yates was attentive to the point of being overprotective. He insisted on walking Nora to and from school, even though it was only next door to their cottage. He would not let her lift anything heavy or stand for too long. He built a beautiful cradle from oak, spending hours carving animals and birds into the headboard. "You are going to spoil this child," Nora teased. "That is my plan," he replied without looking up from his work. In December, as her belly grew round and heavy, Nora finally stopped teaching and handed the school over to Catherine completely. She spent her days preparing for the baby, sewing tiny clothes and organizing the cottage. Yates had built an addition over the fall, adding a small bedroom so the baby could have its own space eventually. The baby came on a cold February morning in 1878, just as dawn was breaking. The birth was difficult and long, but Nora was strong, and the midwife was experienced. Yates stayed by her side the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement. When their son finally arrived, red-faced and wailing, Yates cried openly. He held the tiny baby with his large, scarred hands as if he were holding something infinitely precious and fragile. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Nora, he is perfect." They named him James Samuel Bishop, after Nora's father and the reverend who had married them. He was a healthy baby with a strong set of lungs and his father's dark hair. Yates could not seem to put him down, walking around the cottage with his son cradled against his chest, talking to him, showing him things, utterly besotted. Nora recovered slowly from the birth, and during those weeks, she watched her husband become a father. He changed diapers without complaint, got up in the middle of the night when James cried, rocked him to sleep while singing old war songs in his deep, rumbling voice. He was gentle and patient and completely devoted. "You are a natural at this," Nora said one evening, watching him with their son. "I always wanted children," Yates admitted. "Even during the worst times when I was alone in the mountains, I would think about having a family someday. It seemed impossible then, but now." He looked at her with such love in his eyes that it took her breath away. "Now I have everything I ever wanted." The years that followed were full and happy. Little James grew into a curious, energetic toddler who loved following his father around and trying to help with everything. Nora returned to teaching part-time, sharing responsibilities with Catherine, who had proven herself to be an excellent educator. When James was 2, they had a daughter. Born on a warm summer evening, she came into the world more peacefully than her brother had, as if she knew she was arriving in a house full of love. They named her Rose Elizabeth, and she looked like Nora with auburn hair and green eyes. Yates was just as devoted to Rose as he was to James, cradling his tiny daughter and declaring her the most beautiful baby ever born. James was initially uncertain about this new addition to the family, but he quickly became a protective big brother, always wanting to know where his sister was and if she was all right. Bismarck continued to grow and prosper. The town gained a railroad connection in 1879, which brought more people and more business. New buildings went up regularly, and Yates stayed busy with construction work. He had built a reputation as one of the best carpenters in the territory, and there was always someone who needed his skills. The school expanded twice, and Nora became not just a teacher but a pillar of the community. She organized town gatherings, started a lending library, and helped new families settle in. People came to her for advice, for help, for the simple kindness she offered freely. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep, and she and Yates sat on their porch watching the stars, Nora would think about the woman she had been when she first arrived in Bismarck. That frightened, lonely person who believed she was cursed and brought bad luck to everyone around her seemed like a stranger now. "Do you ever think about that day we met?" she asked Yates one such evening. "All the time," he said, pulling her closer. "Best day of my life, finding you on that road. I really thought I was cursed, you know. I truly believed it. I know you did. But you never did. Even from the beginning, you never believed I was anything but unlucky in the normal way people sometimes are." Yates was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing circles on her shoulder. "That is not entirely true." She pulled back to look at him. "What do you mean?" I thought you might be cursed. Not in the way you thought, but cursed in your own head. Cursed by fear and by believing the worst about yourself. That is a real curse, Nora. One you put on yourself. And I figured if I could just love you enough, be steady enough, lucky enough, maybe you would see that you were not what you thought you were. Maybe you would break your own curse. Tears pricked her eyes. "And did I? What do you think?" He gestured around them. "At their home, their life, their sleeping children inside. Look what we have built. You did that. Your strength, your courage, your love. Not curse, not luck, just you being brave enough to try." "Us," she corrected softly. "We built this together. I never could have done it without you. Maybe. But I never could have had this life without you either. So I guess we are lucky to have found each other." He smiled. "Lucky enough for both of us, like I said." She kissed him, deep and slow, tasting love and promise and the future still ahead of them. Their third child, another boy, arrived when Rose was 3. They named him Daniel, and he was quiet and thoughtful, content to sit for hours watching his siblings play. Yates joked that Daniel had inherited his mountain man temperament, happy to observe the world without needing to be in the thick of it. By this time, the cottage behind the school had become too small for their growing family. Yates bought land on the edge of town and spent a year building them a real house. It was 2 stories, with 4 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and a parlor big enough for Nora's piano, which they moved from the school. The children grew and thrived. James showed his father's aptitude for building things, always hammering together scraps of wood. Rose had her mother's love of music and learning, begging for piano lessons before she could reach the keys properly. Daniel was fascinated by nature, collecting rocks and insects and plants, studying them with serious concentration. Nora continued teaching, eventually becoming the head of Bismarck's growing school system as more teachers were hired and more buildings were built. She loved her work, loved shaping young minds, loved seeing the children grow and learn and become themselves. Yates continued his carpentry, but as he got older, he took on fewer heavy construction jobs and focused more on fine furniture making. He became known throughout the territory for his beautiful work, and people traveled from miles away to commission pieces from him. They faced challenges, of course. Illness, hard winters, economic difficulties. But they faced them together, and nothing ever felt insurmountable when she had Yates beside her and their children around them. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Yates surprised her by taking her back to the spot where they had met. He had borrowed a wagon and packed a picnic, and they left the children with Mrs. Patterson for the day. The road had been improved over the years, but she still recognized the place. The ravine she had tumbled into, now overgrown with wildflowers. The dusty stretch where she had stood with her ruined trunk, certain her life was over. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked as they stood looking at the landscape. "Because this is where everything started, where I found you, where you found me." He took her hands. "I wanted to remember what it felt like that day, to see you standing there and know somehow that you were going to change my life." "Did you really know, that quickly?" "Maybe not consciously, but something in me recognized something in you, like calls to like, I guess." Two lonely people who needed each other. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box carved with intricate designs. "I made you something." Inside the box was a delicate wooden pendant carved to look like a 4-leaf clover. "For luck," he said with a smile. "Not that you need it anymore, but as a reminder of how far we have come. From you thinking you were cursed to us building this beautiful life together." She let him fasten it around her neck, the wood warm against her skin. Then she wrapped her arms around him and held on tight, breathing in the scent of sawdust and soap that had become home to her. "I love you," she whispered. 10 years ago, I could not have imagined this, could not have imagined being this happy." 10 more years," he said against her hair. "And 10 after that, and 10 after that. However many we get, it will never be enough." They had that time and more. They watched their children grow into adults. James became a builder like his father, eventually taking over much of Yates's carpentry business. Rose became a teacher like her mother, working at the very school where Nora had started. Daniel went east to study natural sciences, though he returned regularly to visit. They became grandparents, delighting in their grandchildren the way they had delighted in their own children. Their house was always full of noise and life and love. As they grew older, their love only deepened. Yates's hair went from dark to gray to white, Nora's face lined with age and laughter. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the people they had been that day on the dusty road. Still felt the same pull, the same certainty that they were meant to be together. On a spring evening many years after they first met, they sat on the porch of their house, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Their grandchildren were playing in the yard. The sound of laughter and music drifted from inside where Rose was teaching her daughter to play piano. "You ever miss the mountains?" Nora asked. "Your old life before all this?" Yates was quiet for a moment, considering. "No, that was not living. That was hiding. This is living." "You taught me that. You taught me too. You taught me I was not cursed, that I deserved happiness, that love was possible." He took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers the way they had 1,000 times before. "We taught each other. That is what love is, I think. Teaching each other how to be better, how to be brave, how to be happy." Nora leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "I am so grateful for you, for this life, for everything we have built. Me too, love, me too." They sat there as the sun sank below the horizon, and the stars began to appear, surrounded by family, wrapped in love, living proof that curses could be broken, and lonely people could find home in each other. Years later, when they were both very old and their time was finally coming to an end, they went together within days of each other. Yates went first, peacefully in his sleep, Nora holding his hand. She followed him shortly after, the doctor saying her heart simply could not bear to go on without him. The whole town mourned them. Flags flew at half-mast. The school closed for a week. People came from across the territory to attend the funeral, to pay respects to the couple who had been such a vital part of Bismarck's growth and history. They were buried side by side in the town cemetery, under a large oak tree that Yates had helped plant decades earlier. Their children and great-grandchildren stood around the graves, crying but also smiling. Because how could you be only sad about a love that had been so complete, so full, so beautiful? On their shared headstone, their children had carved a simple inscription. Yates Bishop and Nora Bishop together, they found their luck, and below that, smaller but no less important, he said he was lucky enough for them both. He was right. The story of the schoolteacher and the mountain man became part of Bismarck's folklore. Parents told it to their children as a love story and a lesson about believing in yourself. Teachers used it as an example of how people could overcome their own fears and build extraordinary lives. The house Yates built stood for generations, eventually becoming a historical landmark. But more than the physical legacy, more than the buildings and the stories, what they left behind was a family built on love and trust. Their descendants carried forward the lessons Yates and Nora had lived. That kindness matters, that love is stronger than fear, that luck is often just another word for courage. Rose, teaching at the school her mother had helped build, would sometimes take her students to the spot where the old cottage had stood and tell them about how her parents met. About a woman who thought she was cursed and a man who loved her enough to help her see the truth. About how sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone love you. James, working in his father's old workshop, would run his hands over the tools Yates had used and feel the connection to the man who had taught him that honest work done with care was its own reward. He built houses and furniture with the same attention to detail, the same respect for the wood and the craft. Daniel, though he had traveled far and studied much, always said his most important education came from his parents, from watching them love each other through good times and hard times, from seeing how they faced challenges together, from learning that family was not just something you were born into, but something you built, day by day, choice by choice. The town of Bismarck grew and changed, as all towns do. It survived harsh winters and economic downturns, celebrated good years and new growth. Through it all, the story of Yates and Nora remained a touchstone, a reminder of what was possible when two people found each other at exactly the right moment. Sometimes, on clear spring evenings, people walking past the cemetery swore they could hear music drifting on the wind. Piano music, sweet and clear, playing the old songs Nora used to love. And if they looked carefully at the oak tree above the graves, they might see two shadows there, sitting close together, watching over the town they had helped build and the family they had created. But those were just stories, of course. The kind of tales people told to keep memory alive, to make the past feel present. What was real, what was true, was that once upon a time in Dakota Territory, a woman who thought she was cursed met a man who saw only her strength. He loved her through her fear and doubt. She loved him through his scars and shadows. Together, they built a life that proved luck had nothing to do with fate and everything to do with love. And in the end, that was the greatest magic of all. Not the breaking of some mystical curse, but the simple human miracle of two people choosing each other every day for the rest of their lives, of building something beautiful out of mud and tears and hope, of proving that sometimes when you are brave enough to stop running and let someone walk beside you, you discover you were never cursed at all. You were just waiting for the right person to take your hand and say, "I am lucky enough for both of us. Let me prove it to you." And if you were very lucky, if you were brave enough to believe them, you might just discover they were right all along.